In February, I published an article that is probably simultaneously my most wonky article, a high bar indeed, but also, I think, one of the most impactful analyses I've done. And I've changed my mind about what plans are going to do in response to the new Medicare Part D benefit. I had initially assumed, based on the share of cost that plans were going to assume, that they would essentially stop favoring these high-list, high-rebate products, that they would go for lower-list, low-rebate products so they can keep people lower down under that $2,000 threshold if possible, and that would create that incentive. However, I've changed my mind. When the facts change, I change my mind. I don't know what you do. On the internet, that apparently doesn't matter. But here at Drug Channels, it does matter. And I want to walk through a simple mathematical example. You can change the numbers, the basic conclusion is not going to be different. And in fact, I actually had an actuary send me a message saying, you'd make a good actuary, which is, I guess, high praise from an actuary. And I want to walk through this example because it's something that I don't think people have fully grasped as to what the plan's incentives are going to be, because they're not going to be what you think they are. So let's take 2025, the standard Medicare Part D benefit design. And let's take an example of a specialty drug with a list price of about $7,500 per month, or $90,000 per year. And this $90,000 drug will offer to the plans a 50% rebate. So the net cost would be from 90 to 45, or 45% rebate. Now, what does the benefit look like? Who pays for that drug? Who pays the $45,000 net cost? Well, here's the math. So number one, the patient is going to end up paying their $2,000 maximum out of pocket. That's the $2,000 you see there. The plan, which is the dark blue there, is going to pay their share in the introductory phase, in the initial phase, the 65%, and 60% in the catastrophic phase. The manufacturer, remember, is paying their 10% and then their 20%, and then the government is paying the 20% in that catastrophic coverage. Now, the rebate, the $45,000, gets allocated to offset the costs of the plan and the government. Today, those rebates get allocated so that 65% goes to the plan and 35% goes to the government. Actuaries smarter than me about such things have suggested that given the the decrease in reinsurance, we're going to see the plans get 85% of the rebate and the government get 15%. And in fact, I included a link there to Milliman, who did a really interesting analysis of this that you can go read, it's public, that shows you this 85% number. You can play with that figure. You can look at the model on the blog post I wrote, but the story is not going to change. And so at the end of the day, excluding all of their discounts and fees, just for simplicity, the manufacturer's net revenues from this product would be essentially their list price minus the $45,000 rebate they're paying, minus the $17,300 they're contributing in both the initial coverage phase and the catastrophic coverage phase. So at the end of the day, the manufacturer will net about $27,700. In addition, the impact on premiums will be a little more than $6,500. And the impact on premiums in the Part D world is 25.5% of the plan's cost and the government's cost. So that's the baseline scenario. That's a high-list, high-rebate product, maybe familiar to what you might see today. So my initial instinct when I thought about the IRA, without really doing a lot of deep thinking, was, you know what, low-list, low-rebate products are going to be more attractive. But that turns out to be completely wrong. And here's why. Imagine we take that same product, but now it has a $50,000 list price and a $5,000 rebate. So the net cost is still $45,000. I've done this just to keep the math simple and make the example clear. Now what happens is that $50,000 worth of $5,000 rebate is still a $45,000 drug. The patient is still paying $2,000. The manufacturer's share, however, drops dramatically because they're no longer paying, remember, they're paying the 10% and the 20%, and now that number is now not on a $90,000 base, but on a $50,000 base. And when you allocate the rebate, in fact, the plan's costs are much higher in this new Part D benefit design. And you can monkey around with the numbers, and it pretty much works for a very wide range of sharing of the rebate. Now, this sounds okay. Well, this has pretty powerful implications, as I'll talk about, for market access. But now, consider what happens to a product that has an MFP, a maximum fair price. And I'm going to try to use a simplistic example to illustrate what's going to happen. So let's take a product that has an MFP ceiling that's set at 40% of the non-FAMP. Remember, non-FAMP is the non-federal average manufacturer price, so excludes commercial rebates. And that is the number that the ceiling will be set at. Now, we know from a CBO study, linked at the bottom of this slide, that for specialty drugs, non-FAMP is about 85% of the wholesale acquisition cost. So a 40% ceiling times an 85% non-FAMP as a percent of WAC means that we end up with about a ceiling that's roughly 34% of the list price, or in this case, $30,600. Now, you already can see the press release. You can already see the press conference where the president comes on and says, this drug used to be $90,000 a year, but now it's $30,000. We saved $60,000 thanks to our negotiation process. That sounds pretty awesome, right? But here's where it gets funky. Remember, what happens when you have an MFP product is the manufacturer's obligation goes away and the government picks it up. So when you run the numbers, the patient is still paying $2,000. They saved nothing in this. The plan's costs actually go up because you don't have as much of a contribution from the manufacturer. The DIR essentially is being absorbed by the government. But the government's share of the cost actually increases. And what's even weirder is the manufacturer's net revenue is higher than in the high list, high rebate. And the contribution to premiums is higher. Now, I know at this point you're saying, huh? That's a lot of numbers. But I think this is one of the most impactful analyses I've done about Part D. And I would say this is an example of an unintended consequence. I don't think it was intended that the new Part D benefit design would favor high list, high rebate products, or that MFP products would be less attractive to the plans and have a bigger premium impact, which gives you some insight into how the plans are going to start to think about positioning these products in 2026 on their formularies. And if you're a manufacturer, give you some insight in how you might compete in a category in which there is an MFP product on the formulary. So now let's consider what this might mean for some of the market access implications and what Part D plans are going to start to do.